In a historic and far-reaching decision, the Supreme Court dramatically altered the landscape of American trade policy by striking down President Trump's sweeping tariffs. This momentous ruling sent shockwaves through Washington and across the globe as the highest court in the land weighed in on the limits of presidential power in matters of international commerce. The justices ruled that President Trump had overstepped his constitutional authority, making it clear that the executive branch cannot unilaterally impose such significant economic measures without congressional approval. In a decisive 6-3 majority, the court declared that only Congress holds the constitutional power to impose tariffs, equating them with taxes. This was a direct and unmistakable rebuke to the Trump administration's broad interpretation of executive authority, and a reminder of the careful balance of powers enshrined in the Constitution. For years, Trump's tariffs had reshaped global supply chains, disrupted international trade, and hit American businesses and consumers with higher costs. The administration justified these sweeping measures under the banner of national security, but critics argued they were economically damaging and legally questionable. Now, with this landmark decision, the Supreme Court has set a powerful precedent. Presidents cannot bypass Congress to levy broad economic measures like tariffs. This ruling reaffirms the vital role of the legislative branch in shaping the nation's economic destiny, and ensures that such impactful decisions are subject to public debate and democratic oversight. The ruling forces a dramatic rethinking of U.S. trade strategy, leaving policymakers, businesses, and global partners scrambling to adjust. It also raises urgent questions about the fate of billions of dollars collected under now invalid tariffs, and whether those funds will be refunded to affected companies and consumers. Chief Justice Roberts' opinion reasserts Congress's primary role in taxation and commerce, fundamentally altering the landscape of American trade policy. The decision marks a turning point, signaling a new era of checks and balances in the making of U.S. economic policy. Tariffs are essentially taxes placed on goods that are brought into a country from abroad. For decades, they have been used as a tool by governments to influence trade, protect local jobs, and sometimes to send a political message to trading partners. When a tariff is imposed, it raises the price of foreign products, making them less competitive compared to goods made at home. The idea is to encourage consumers and businesses to buy domestic products, supporting local industries and workers. This can help certain sectors grow, but it can also lead to higher prices for everyday items, and sometimes even spark trade wars with other countries. President Trump made tariffs the centerpiece of his America First agenda, targeting countries like China and justifying his actions as necessary for national security. He argued that these measures would bring back American manufacturing jobs and reduce the country's dependence on foreign goods. By invoking laws like the Trade Expansion Act and the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, the administration bypassed Congress and imposed tariffs on billions in imports. These laws, originally intended for rare emergencies, became the legal foundation for sweeping trade actions. Critics argued this stretched the definition of national security and sidestepped the Constitution's clear assignment of tariff authority to Congress. Many lawmakers and legal experts warned that allowing the president to act alone set a dangerous precedent, undermining the balance of power. The legal battle wasn't just about economics. It was about whether the president could exploit emergency powers to seize a core legislative function. At stake was the fundamental question of who controls America's economic policy: Congress, as the Constitution intended, or the executive branch. The Supreme Court has now answered, making it clear that the president cannot use a loophole to usurp Congress's power to tax. The justices reaffirmed that the authority to impose tariffs and thus to shape the nation's trade policy rests firmly with the legislative branch. This decision closes the door on unilateral tariff action by the executive branch. It sends a strong message that emergency powers have limits, and that the checks and balances built into the Constitution still matter. The era of tariffs as a presidential economic weapon is over. From now on, any major changes to trade policy will require debate, negotiation, and approval from Congress, restoring the balance of power at the heart of American democracy. The Supreme Court showdown was more than just a legal dispute. It was a dramatic fight over the very foundation of American government. At stake was the question of who truly holds the power to shape the nation's economic destiny, and how far the executive branch can go in times of crisis. The heart of the battle centered on control over America's economic levers, who gets to pull them, and under what authority. With billions of dollars and global markets hanging in the balance, the stakes could not have been higher. Businesses and trade groups argued that tariffs are, at their core, a form of taxation, and according to Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution, only Congress has the explicit authority to levy taxes and duties. They insisted that this power is a cornerstone of the separation of powers, designed to prevent any one branch from overreaching. Their challenge focused on President Trump's use of the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, a law intended to give the president tools to respond to extraordinary threats, but critics pointed out that the act never explicitly grants the president the power to impose tariffs, raising alarms about executive overreach. The administration, however, pushed back forcefully. Officials argued that regulating trade has always included the ability to impose tariffs, and that these measures are not taxes in the traditional sense, but rather tools to protect national interests and respond to emergencies. Solicitor General Sauer warned that if the president's powers were curtailed, America's ability to act swiftly in the face of global threats would be severely weakened. He painted a picture of a nation hamstrung by bureaucracy, unable to defend its economic security, but the Supreme Court was not convinced. The justices saw the administration's argument as a dangerous expansion of executive authority, one that twisted the language of the law to justify actions never intended by Congress. In their deliberations, the justices made it clear, emergency powers, no matter how urgent the situation, cannot be used to override the explicit boundaries set by the Constitution. The separation of powers must be preserved. The ruling sent a powerful message. Only Congress can impose taxes or tariffs, and the president cannot act alone. In reaffirming this principle, the court underscored the enduring strength of constitutional checks and balances at the heart of American democracy. During oral arguments, justices from both sides of the ideological spectrum challenged the administration's sweeping claims. Chief Justice Roberts questioned if there was any limit to the president's power under this theory. Justice Sotomayor bluntly stated, "Tariffs are taxes. That's Congress's job." Even Trump-appointed Justices Gorsuch and Barrett expressed skepticism, probing the lack of precedent for such unilateral action. The court's bipartisan doubts signaled deep concern about executive overreach. Their pointed questions foreshadowed the decision to end the president's tariff authority. The ruling unleashed immediate economic uncertainty. What happens to the $89 billion in tariffs already collected? Businesses paid these duties for years. Now the government faces the prospect of massive refunds. Untangling who gets the money, importers, manufacturers, or consumers, is a logistical nightmare. The financial hit to the federal budget is enormous, turning a revenue stream into a sudden liability. Some officials warned the cost could balloon even higher if the legal fight had dragged on. For businesses, refunds could offer relief, but the timeline is unclear, leaving many in limbo. The abrupt end to tariffs will force industries to adapt quickly, creating new market shocks. The fallout highlights the far-reaching consequences of the court's decision. For small business owners, the tariff war was personal and punishing. Take Sarah Wells, who designs bags for nursing mothers and relies on Asian manufacturers. When tariffs hit, her import costs soared, wiping out profits and threatening her company's survival. She halted new product development and had to lay off a valued employee, painful decisions driven by government policy. Sarah's story mirrors thousands of small businesses forced to raise prices, delay growth, or downsize. The Supreme Court's ruling may offer hope for recovery, but it can't erase years of lost opportunities. These entrepreneurs are the backbone of the economy, and their struggles reveal the real-world impact of trade policy. The end of the tariff era brings relief, but also a long road to rebuilding. President Trump's response was swift and defiant, calling the ruling catastrophic for the economy and national security. He doubled down on his claims that tariffs slashed the trade deficit and boosted American strength, despite the court's rebuke. Behind the scenes, officials scrambled to craft a Plan B, hinting at new legal or legislative strategies to restore tariff powers. The administration's rhetoric aims to rally supporters and frame the court as an obstacle to the America First agenda. The battle over trade policy is far from over. Expect new clashes with Congress and the judiciary. For now, the president's signature economic weapon has been stripped away. The Supreme Court's decision is a landmark for constitutional law and American democracy. It reaffirms the separation of powers, Only Congress can impose tariffs, even in emergencies. The ruling dismantles a disruptive trade regime, promising lower prices for consumers and more certainty for businesses. Industries once shielded by tariffs must now adapt to global competition. Future presidents will need congressional approval for major trade actions, making policy more deliberative and democratic. The decision returns economic power to elected representatives, as the framers intended. It ensures that sweeping economic policies require open debate, not executive decree. The court's ruling secures a foundational principle: no single branch can wield unchecked power over the nation's economy.